Hello and welcome to another episode of Finders Keepers, the podcast that helps you find the best keepers for your keeper and dynasty leagues. I'm your host Jordox, and round 16 of the AFL season was the last bye round for the season. Thank goodness for that. We had 8 bye rounds this year. That's a third of the season. And with opening round disappearing next season, yes, I think we can safely say we won't ever have 8 bye rounds in a season again. Until Tasmania arrive, which is only a couple of years away, but that's another story. I had a pretty good weekend, enjoyed plenty of footy, not so much the showdown on Saturday night though. And in fantasy, I won all my keeper leagues, but lost both my single season draft comps. Now my home league, Finders Keepers, which I've talked about a bit this year in my eternal quest to get into that 4th spot on the ladder, goes on for another week. So I had a comfortable win against the bottom side, but I was much more invested in how the side in 4th spot was tracking. The team name, Infinity Rangers, and he was up against a top side who had some big scores, including Oliver's 129, Will Ashcroft's 134, and he even captained Nick Dacos's 143. So heading into Sunday, I was pretty sure I was going to win, and it looked like the Rangers were going to lose. And I thought, you beauty, I'm going to be sitting in 4th spot finally. Except for Harry Sheasel, who was the Rangers captain on Sunday and delivered him a season high score of 173, and Rangers got up. So I sit in 5th spot still, but guess who I'm playing next week? Infinity Rangers in the biggest game of my season. Can I nab 4th spot with just 4 rounds to go afterwards? But on to the podcast for this week. I will go through my waiver picks from last week, see how they fared, and put up some names for you to target this week. I'll go through the things I noticed across round 16, and then I'll wrap up the episode. There's no questions from the listeners this week, so I'll finish it there. But because we don't have any questions, I thought I'd start the episode talking a little bit about this time of the season and how this is a really important part of your season to look ahead and start some list management decisions now. So we're back to full squads this week, and most leagues will have, 4 or 5 rounds left until fantasy finals. So you now have a chance to look at your side and start to make some, as I said, list management decisions. Are you in contention for finals? And if you are you realistically a chance to win the flag? Or are you looking at, putting some players in for early surgery? Metaphorically, of course. Your season's done and the 2027 season planning has begun. So depending on which side of the coin you sit in, you want to now start planning and making the most of the rest of what's left in this season. Have a look at your squad and start to loosely plan who you think will be in your squad next year. For keeper leagues that delist, have a bit of an idea of who's going to make the cut for next year. And then for those you don't think you can keep, try and cash in on them now. Get some value. Rather than a delisting at the end of the year, you could get some trade capital for them now. A lot of leagues' trade deadlines may have passed, but if yours hasn't, I'd suggest getting busy now. For example, if your season is shot, so you're not playing finals, and you've got Luke Parker or a Luke Parker type. He's a 33-year-old, has a plum defender role, he's averaging 95. He's the perfect sort of guy that if he's not in your long-term plans, cash him out now, trade him to a side who's at the top of the ladder and is contending, and try and get yourself some nice younger assets or draft picks just while the going is good. Conversely, if you're contending yourself and you've got a young prospect that has a bright future, but you know that you're not going to be holding that player in the off season, trade him now. Trade him to one of the rebuilding sides in your league, and in return get someone who's going to get on the park for you now, score well, maybe take you to a premiership, and you won't have any issues delisting in a few months' time. So spend a bit of time looking at your squads this week and really start to plan what's the back end of 2026 going to look like, and how can you set yourself up for the next season and obviously beyond. Let's jump into my waiver picks for this week, and I always start by looking at the names I suggested a week ago and seeing how they fared. So I put up 4 names last week, and my number 1 pick by a mile was Jack Lukosius, whose newfound spot on the wing really caught my attention a week ago, and he played really well in that game but went off injured after half time. So how'd he go this week? Well, his ownership last week was at 59%, and that only went up slightly to 64%. And I think a big part of that was the injury, and it looked like maybe he wouldn't play. But yeah, he's gone up to 64% ownership, and that's ownership across all keeper and dynasty leagues on Keeper Fantasy platform. He scored 54, played the wing. He started well, but yeah, not a big game, but I think he looked good early, that's for sure. Just wasn't a lot of touches for him, certainly in that second half. But yeah, looking forward to seeing how he goes this week. I really think he's going to be a good pick still. The other names I had, a couple of crows. We had Mark Keane. His ownership went bananas. So he was at 17%. Came back into the side last week with a 113. And that sent his ownership all the way up to 66%. That's the biggest jump I think I've seen in 1 week, 17 to 66. But he was back to earth this week with a 52. Most crows were down in the stats, but yeah, he had just the 3 marks. Got absolutely torched by Georgiades too. The other crow who was also at 17% last week, Luke Nankervis, he scored a ton last week, looking really good at sort of a little bit of halfback, a little bit of wing. His ownership went up to 35%, and he just never got going in this game with a 49, unfortunately. And then the last guy, Cooper Trembath, who I'm a big fan of this guy. His ownership was at 34%. Last week, he scored a nice 101. And with the news Tristan Sherry would miss, I think that got a lot of people excited about him. Ownership went up to 56%, which is still too low, I reckon, for the gun that this guy's going to be. He scored 75, only kicked 1 goal, but he had 52% of the CBAs and only had 5 hit-outs though. But yeah, 75, it's a good score, and yeah, he's just an exciting player to watch, Trembath. So yeah, nothing exciting there last week. I'll try and get some better ones this week. Actually, there is some interesting names this week. I'll run through 5 names I've got. No particular order this week. I just want to look at some interesting things that have popped up. So first one, Carl Warner is someone I've talked about in the past and suggested, I think, in the past, but just got to give him a shout out. He's still only owned in 68% of leagues. Scored another nice one on the weekend, an 89. He's averaging 76 in his last 3. He's actually averaging 74 for the season now, is Warner. He's playing a great role back there. And he laid 5 tackles on the weekend, so he's starting to add a bit more of the physical side as well as, you know, the +6 game. Like the look of him a lot. Next guy is Marcus Herbert for West Coast. He's one of the mid-season draftees. He debuted the week before, so this was his second game. He's owned in 58% of leagues and scored 67 in this game. I like his role. He's playing defence and he even took some kick-ins. So, yeah, a nice little role there for him. Now, speaking of a nice role at half-back, Jack Carroll for St Kilda is owned in 45% of leagues. Now, they just had the bye, St Kilda, so obviously no score on the weekend, but he scored 72 the week before. A few weeks before that, he scored a ton. And he could be someone who benefits from the Jack Sinclair injury, who's out, I think, for the season. And Carroll's someone that I think we've all kind of looked at a little bit already this year and maybe moved him on, but he could be someone who gives us a nice little 6-week run to finish the year and is worth checking out for sure. Next guy is Cooper Harvey for North Melbourne. He's owned in 42% of leagues, scored 81 on the weekend, and he's played 3 games for the season now, averaging 73, but it's the role that's really interesting. He's been playing off half back, even taking a few kick-ins, and he has forward status. So at 21, he's worth a good look, I think. The only thing is, I just don't understand how North have so many guys playing off half back, but it is a very fruitful area. There's some big scores going on at that half back line for North at the minute. And yeah, Cooper Harvey, 73 average in his 3 games. He's getting amongst it as well. And then the last guy is Ollie Franco for West Coast, another of the mid-season draftees. Hasn't debuted yet. He's owned in 42% of leagues, which tells you there's a bit of talk about him. He hasn't played yet, but had a monster game in the Waffle, 31 touches, 11 tackles. With the way West Coast are going, they haven't been great the last few weeks. I would not be surprised to see him get a debut this week, Franco. And just as a quick extra, Finn McRae had a big game in the 2s as well. Remember him? He's owned in 11% of leagues, and we're going to see him in West Coast colours at some point, surely. So maybe this is the week we get to see him. So there's 5 names. Definitely worth considering this week, particularly the guys, you're just looking for someone to give you a nice 6-week run. And, a couple of the names I put in there are for sort of long-term stashes, but someone like a Jack Carroll or a Carl Warner could give you a nice little finish to the year for sure. All right, let's jump into the things I noticed across round 16, and it started on Thursday night with what was a pretty appetising clash, Brisbane versus Sydney. And, it was an entertaining game, and Brisbane is starting to really get going, and Sydney, I think, have just been a little bit off the last few weeks. So this was a big loss for them that will either be the kick up the bum they need, or, maybe they're going to struggle a little bit. But Brisbane look back in business, and one of the big reasons for that was Josh Dunkley, who put up the first big score of the year for him with a 130. He's dropped right off this year in the fantasy sense, but this was big game, 26 touches, 8 marks and 9 tackles. Owners will be hoping for a lot more of that in the last weeks of this year. Jasper Fletcher scored 87. He's starting to find more of the footy, and looks like maybe the bye and the week off did him some good. I talked about how he hasn't had a game off since debuting, and maybe he's getting a bit tired. So the bye obviously did him pretty good. For the Swans, Callum Mills, the midfield role has returned, which is very exciting as someone who owns Mills. I thought we'd see him in the midfield much earlier than round 16, but here we are. 32 touches, which is the first time he's gone over 30 touches this season. And yeah, he was at 22 centre ball ups at 63%, after only, 3 for the whole year beforehand. So yeah, great to see. And yeah, I'll be very interested to see if it was just a one-off or if he's going to be in there again. So we'll have a good look at that this week. Errol Goulden returned to the side, and it was just great to see him back. Superstar of the game. Scored 84, just had the 18 touches, played a mixture of forward and midfield, but he looked pretty good to me. I think it was a pretty good first game back, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him punching out tons from here on. And then lastly, Chad Warner. He is absolutely flying. He's got 4 tons in a row now, and he was just brilliant in this game. Kept Swans within arm's reach, I think, for most of it. Scored 128, 28 touches, 7 tackles, and 4 goals, including one that'll be pretty hard to beat for goal of the year, I reckon. He intercepted it, I think, like on the wing, and ran it the whole way, dodged, evaded players, and then kicked it truly inside 50. So, Yeah, that was a great running goal. And yeah, he's on fire at the minute, Warner. He's been a pretty frustrating guy, I reckon, in keeper leagues because he's always had this in him, but then he just goes missing. Maybe he has finally arrived as a consistent scorer. And that's huge for owners because he's got that forward status. On to Friday night, and it was Hawthorn and the Giants. I didn't see this game. I was out at a work event. But it looked like Hawthorn were just too good. I think the Giants made a run late, got the margin back smaller, but I think Hawks were always in control. Not much to sort of look at for Hawthorn, just Blake Hardwick, who I wondered last week with the Hawthorn outs. They had Weddle out, they had Impey out, whether Hardwick would then be sent back to the back line, or would they wait until Jack Gunston's back in the side before that happened. But they sent him back, and he scored 99, took 10 marks. So he's an interesting prospect, Hardwick. He's not a young player. He's not someone we look at too much for a keeper league, but as a good scorer, there's such a swing between forward and back, whether he's scoring well. So he's in the back line at the minute, so he's a good option. The second you see him playing forward again, you can probably let him go. Now, GWS did some really weird stuff positionally in this game, from what I can see after half-time, with their midfield in particular. After half-time, Kieran Briggs, Finn Callaghan and Clayton Oliver all attended 0 centre ball ups. None in the second half. Lockie Ash was sent in there. You had Bedford and Toby Green. They were used in there a lot too. Callaghan went to half-back and scored 68 points off half-back in the second half and finished with 121. And then Oliver played forward in the second half, but scored 62 points to finish with 129. So the role changes didn't affect their scoring, but very, very curious, particularly Oliver forward. And then Briggs played forward, and I think they just had Callum Brown, Lee Galea as the rucks for the second half. And Briggs went forward and he barely touched it, so that didn't work. But really interesting for the Giants to make such a big shift. Like you're talking about their number one ruck and their number one and number two midfielders all out of the midfield for the whole second half. It's experimental, surely. Anyway, we'll see if it goes back to normal next week for them. On Saturday, Carlton hosted West Coast and made it 6 wins in a row for the Blues. They are flying and made light work of the Eagles. Really dominated them, so much that 14 Carlton players scored 80-plus fantasy points. So it is hard to know what to make from some of these scores because obviously everyone was getting involved. But Billy Wilson scored his first fantasy ton after he had 12 marks and 25 touches for a 101. And he's just been great, hasn't he? Like, for anyone who jumped on him a few weeks ago, you'd be absolutely stoked. He's scoring really well, has a great role. And Ben Ainsworth had a massive game too. He's probably one of the underrated players who got traded in the off-season. He's had a pretty good season at Carlton. Him and Will Hayward together, been great pickups. But Ainsworth scored 112. He saw some midfield time. Huge game, 28 touches too. So, yeah, he's been scoring pretty well lately, getting up the ground. But I do feel like his score was probably just a little inflated. Just such was Carlton's dominance. For West Coast, Marcus Herbert, I spoke about him earlier. Second game, scored 67, took a few kick-ins. He's a nice type, I think. And Jack Graham was back for his first game since round 5. And he played on the ball, scored 80, which I think was close to their top score. And yeah, so a good return from him after missing so much footy. Saturday twilight was Collingwood and Richmond at the G. And I watched bits and pieces of this game, was listening to a bit of it on the radio too. And yeah, Richmond sort of just wouldn't go away. They kept hanging around, making little charges just to keep the scoreboard gettable. But Collingwood, did what they had to do and ran out comfortable winners in the end. Ed Allen is someone I want to talk about. He's had a nice little role shift into the middle, playing as a bit of a tagger, run-with player. And he scored okay the week before, but he hasn't really put up a good score just yet. Until now, he scored 81 in this game, marking Tim Taranto, and he got that good score thanks to 9 tackles, which is a great effort. So his scores are just steadily building. He's got a nice role. Collingwood have to invest in some younger mids. I think Ed Allen's a pretty good prospect at this stage. Nick Dacos, he's a decent prospect himself. He was always going to be a good chance to dominate this game and have a big one, and he duly delivered. 37 touches, 3 goals, a 143, and remains the number 1 averaging fantasy player for the season with 123 average. Incredible. Hard to see that being beaten. And got Bailey Smith behind him at 118. Now, Jordan De Goey, I've got to put my hand up and say I got this guy wrong. I just didn't think at his age he could turn into a permanent mid and be a consistent fantasy scorer. So I just haven't been believing his scores, but he just looks unreal. 5 tons in his last 7 and just no sign of slowing down. He's playing really good footy, and yeah, I think he's the sort of guy that I reckon in a lot of leagues he would have been drafted in the redraft of a keeper league and maybe thrown back into the pool. So I reckon someone might have jumped on him in those early rounds and yeah, it would be loving life. He's flying. In fact, I've got it here. His first 4 games, he went 79, 54, 52, 70. Then he got injured on a 17, came back in round 7 and has averaged 102 in the 9 games since then. It's incredible, really. Now, for Richmond, Tim Taranto had a pretty handy game, kicking 4 goals as a midfielder, but it kind of summed him up at the minute, his fantasy output. You know, a midfielder who kicks 4 goals and he scores a 105. And that's great, like he scored a ton, that's great. But a midfielder kicking 4 goals, it's a pretty low score. I would have thought he'd get up there. But points are hard for Richmond at the minute. But yeah, Taranto, well, he got a ton, so I think you take that every day of the week. A couple of the young guys, some good signs. Sam Cumming has had a nice little spike in his CBAs the last 2 weeks, and his scores have picked up as well. This week, though, he scored 83 but had 27 touches. It's a great return for the first-year Tiger, and yeah, I think the start of something pretty good for his career. Yeah, hopefully they keep him in the middle for the rest of the season, and we can see him continue to grow. Taj Houghton played his second game back, and yeah, he was quite off it last week, but yeah, much better performance from him. Great to see him on the ball as well. 17 touches, only 4 kicks, but he laid 7 tackles, which showed great intent, and a score of 67, I think is pretty good for owners who have been waiting to see him. On to Saturday night and the showdown, and Port Adelaide were just way too good for the Crows. Adelaide just didn't look up for it on the night, and you know, it was pretty disappointing, obviously, but I was in a weird way kind of happy for Port. I mean, yeah, that sounds weird saying that out loud. I just think they've been much better than the ladder position says. They've been playing really good footy and losing close games. It just always felt like they'd have an upset win in the showdown. It just felt like that sort of thing would happen. So Crows were really flat. Hopefully it's a one-off for us because we were in good form. But yeah, Port Adelaide, just the attack at the contest, the pressure was just too much. Now, some names, more position sort of observations. So Joe Richards and Jace Burgoyne fell out of the CBA mix this week, just 3 between them. And a big reason for that was Ollie Wine's return to the side, but also Jackson Mead saw some time in there, which was a bit different. It worked. Port Adelaide absolutely smashed the Crows out of the middle with 16 centre clearances to 6, and 12 of those 16 centre clearances were Horne-Francis and Butters. They dominated. Horne-Francis scored a 6-ton of the season for him with 108. He's now averaging 95. It's been a great season for him. And Butters just did as he pleased with 37 touches, 7 tackles, and a very well-deserved showdown medal. And yeah, that was the story of the game. Josh Lai was playing in his 11th game, and I'd imagine this was his best game yet. He completely shut Josh Rochelle down, took him out of the game, and took 10 marks as well. A lot of intercept marks, scored 72, and yeah, just Rochelle was nowhere. So great game from Lai, and yeah, I was just impressed with his marking prowess. Took some really good marks in the back line there. For the Crows, not really much. It was a down night, lots of poor scores from the Adelaide players, and Dan Curtin was one of them. He just scored a 59. But I bring him up because I was just surprised the Crows didn't try him in the middle, which we've seen in the past. The Adelaide mids were getting absolutely smashed, and yeah, at no point did they throw Curtin to a centre ball up, which I just found that strange. So maybe we'll see that next week, and that'll help his scoring for sure. And on to the Sunday games, North and Essendon at Marvel. I didn't see this game, but it looked like Essendon were hanging around for most of the game. I think maybe more just North's inaccurate kicking for goal kept Essendon in the hunt, but North did what they had to do and came home with another win, and that's 8 wins for the season now for North. So yeah, it's good signs for them. Great to see them picking up more wins. It's been a very long few years at the bottom for North fans. Now, Harry Sheezel, holy hat, what a score. 173, the highest score of the fantasy season so far, and he did it with 43 touches, 12 marks and 8 tackles. He's just an absolute jet, isn't he? Caleb Daniel, for the second week in a row, recorded 40 disposals. He scored 139 to go with his 153 last week. And in his last 2 games, he's had 80 touches and taken 25 marks. Incredible numbers, and just speaks to that half-back role at North, because Luke Parker had another good game, and yeah, there's just plenty of ball back there. But yeah, who'd have thought that? Caleb Daniel, 40 touches, 2 weeks in a row. Good on him. And then Cooper Harvey, who I spoke about earlier in the waivers, 81, a few games back in the side now, and just has a nice little roll back there at half-back, taking some kick-ins, and yeah, that forward status he has makes him very handy. For Essendon, Sam Durham continues his fantastic breakout season. I thought maybe some of the Essendon ins would affect his role, because you had, Parrish in, Caldwell in, a couple of other senior guys as well, but it didn't affect his role at all, and he scored 108 playing as one of their main mids, so that's fantastic for Durham owners. Andy McGrath came back in for his first game since round 11, and he scored pretty well, 26 touches at half-back for a 91. A lot of Essendon's halfbacks scored really well though. Mason Redmond, 118, Jordan Ridley with a 98, Jacob Farrow with a 90. But then there was a quieter one from Zach Merritt, who was at halfback, but he had Finn O'Sullivan for company all day. Still scored in the 90s, but certainly, not what I would have thought in a game where Essendon backs had a lot of footy. And then the round finished with Sunday twilight footy at Optus Stadium with Fremantle and Gold Coast. And I was looking forward to this. I really thought Gold Coast would give Freo a run here, and, it's getting to that point of the year. Suns have got to make a statement, or they're just going to drift off into the season and maybe not even play finals the way they're going. But Fremantle just kept doing what they're doing, just completely crushed them. Yet another win. Gold Coast only kicked 3 goals for the whole game. Amazing. So for the Dockers, Andy Brayshaw. I wondered if he was back last week. He had that big game And I just wondered if he was maybe going to do what we have loved him doing in recent years. And he did. He went back-to-back 130s. So he scored 131. Last week was 140-something. So that's back-to-back 130s. And I went back and looked. He's only done that once before in his whole career, back-to-back 130-plus scores. And that was 2022, and that was his career year where he averaged 112. Interesting. So how'd he do it? 29 touches, 9 marks, 6 tackles. Just dominated. And it's really interesting because some of the other Freo mids, Caleb Sarong, Hayden Young, they all had very low scores. So not sure what it is about Brayshaw at the minute, but he is the man. Sean Darcy returned for his first game since round 5. He had low time on ground, 59%, only scored 48, which isn't too bad. But importantly, he definitely ate into a little bit of Luke Jackson's ruck time, which was, I think, the concern for Jackson owners when they saw Mason Cox out for Sean Darcy, because Cox can play a lot more forward. Darcy can't play forward as well. But anyway, Jackson still scored okay and he's still a gun. I just think you'd rather Cox be the second ruck, not Sean Darcy. And Gold Coast, disappointing night for them, but exciting for Zeke Uland owners. This was his best score of his season, his career. He scored 86 playing at half back, probably alongside his brother, I'd say, in that role. I think he might have been on like 50 or something at quarter time. So obviously a huge first quarter and then not much after that. But for those who invested in him with probably pick 1 or 2 in the draft start of this year, nice to see a good score like that from him. And then lastly, John Noble was predominantly wing again, and he's dropped off the last couple of weeks. He was on 0 at quarter time. Didn't find the footy once in that first quarter and finished with a 62. And if you'll remember, someone wrote in a few weeks ago asking, should I trade John Noble now while the going's good? And absolutely, I said, yes, you should. And he did. So he'd be happy because Noble has dropped off in recent weeks. And that's it for everything I noticed across round 16. And I'll actually wrap the podcast right here and now because, yeah, shorter episode this week, but next week will be much bigger as we have 9 games of footy to look at once again. Just a reminder though, before I do finish up, if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening, and even leave a 5-star review while you're at it. That would be immensely appreciated. Make sure if you're on X, you're following the page at FindKeepAFL to keep up to date with everything on the Finders Keepers podcast. And that's, of course, where you could drop a line, send through any questions you might have about keeper leagues, draft leagues, anything fantasy, anything footy. Send me a message or a comment on there. And also send through any trades that have gone through in your league and you want me to read them out and give my analysis on how they have fared. So that's it for this week. Thanks again for listening. Good luck for the round ahead, round 17. Enjoy the full schedule of 9 games again. Enjoy putting out a full squad again, assuming you don't have too many injuries. And I'll be back again next week to do it all again. But in the meantime, I'm Jordox. This has been Finders Keepers. And until next time, keep on keeping on.